Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Front Line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Please be sure to download the app, the Veritas app. Share it with your friends and your family. You'll have access to all of our station's content, not just the Front Line with Joe and Joe. Keep in mind, we are an EWTN affiliate, so you have all that content also, plus the original programming. And Joe and I are all over social media, X, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube. We post all these interviews on social media. Also go live Thursday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern, where we get in a whole lot of trouble. Help us out. If you want to help us get to a wider audience, like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. So today, we are very pleased and honored to be joined by Rachel Isaac Popcak. And we're going to be, many of you know who she is. She is out there in the public arena, which we're grateful for. Catholic Counselors, Christ-centered coaching for elite athletes and high-pressure professionals. I'm going to tell you right now, Rachel, you're at the front line with Joe and Joe, and we like to get in trouble, so you might be in for it. I'm just throwing it out there to you, because I don't have to tell you nowadays, both as Catholics, you're an athlete, not a wonderful combination, nowadays. So we're gonna hash that all out. So Rachel Isaac, Rachel, is it Isaac Popcak or Popcak Isaac?
Popcak Isaac, but I'll respond.
All right, I screwed that up. So I'm just an Italian guy from New Jersey. Rachel Popcak Isaac is a licensed clinical social worker, mental performance specialist, and founder of the Success and Performance Coaching Program at CatholicCounselors.com. I will post a link to CatholicCounselors.com in the description, and we'll give Rachel an opportunity to let everybody know where they can follow her on social media. She holds a psychology degree from Franciscan University of Steubenville and a master's in clinical social work from the University of Pittsburgh. Rachel's worked with athletes, executives, and high achievers of all kinds, helping them overcome anxiety, build authentic confidence, and sustain peak performance. Rachel, I might hire you. Just stick around after the show,
Perfect.
especially for the anxiety part.
Yes.
Rachel, welcome to the Front Line with Joe and Joe, our sister.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Joe Resinello, I'll throw it over to you.
Reg, we always begin with a prayer to Our Lady. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, never was it known that anyone who sought your help or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, a virgin of virgins, our mother. To you we come, for you we stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother, the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your clemency hear and answer us, amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Well, Rachel, it's an interesting niche, to be honest with you. I immediately, when I saw it, jumped at it because, to be truthful with you, counseling, sadly, has been manhandled by the woke agenda, and we probably want to get into that a little bit, how that has affected you, how you push back against it, and I'm sure you do. But tell us a little bit about your background. I know you were an athlete, so you obviously know what makes an athlete tick. And tell us about this particular niche of counseling.
Yeah, so I grew up figure skating and dancing. I was a competitive figure skater. I danced, and performed all the time. And, I grew up kind of in the world of that pressure and that anxiety and that perfectionism, right? And just kind of all of the expectations that come with that. And when I started figure skating and dancing, I was the kid who was so afraid to compete and perform that, I would throw up before a competition, and throughout my career, if you will, I really did that work to build my confidence, to manage stress and anxiety, to the point where at the end of my career, again, if you will, I loved it. I was excited by it. I was fueled by it. And so I saw in my own life the impact of building those skills and tools for confidence building and stress management. But I also saw that in a lot of my friends dealing with those same types of pressures. And it doesn't just kind of end with your sport either. I saw it carry over into, they had to have straight A's in all of their AP classes. They had to, I had one friend who was figure skating, dancing, was in all honors classes, was modeling, she was doing pageants, she had to do all of the things and do them perfectly, basically. And just the pressures of that build up and that impact us in our daily lives. I saw it from so many different sides, but then, my dad started CatholicCounselors.com. So I grew up in that world, in that counseling world as well. And I loved both, and I had an opportunity to go professional with figure skating. But as much as I loved it, I also recognized that it did have a very, short shelf life. And so I wanted to do something that was really meaningful to me and stay in the world that I loved. And so when I was 16, I actually learned about sports and performance counseling. And kind of from then on, I just decided that that was what I wanted to do. That was what I wanted to go into. And so throughout all of my education and career after that, I pursued the sports and performance counseling and coaching, kind of a lot of the mental performance stuff. And then that's really blended into my work with Catholic counselors and just a really beautiful and natural progression, being able to integrate the faith into my work as a Catholic counselor, as, a pastoral counselor, and then also, of course, as a mental performance specialist. So being able to then work with athletes and executives and high achievers and, just even their everyday life who want to be who God created them to be and be able to manage the stress and anxiety and pressures that come with the world or the profession that they're in. So it was, kind of a clear path for me, I think, throughout my life that has really, it's turned into something that I'm really passionate about and really grateful to be able to do.
Rachel Popcak Isaac is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. So please, I'm going to post a link in the description. Something we should all take a look at, CatholicCounselors.com, overcoming anxiety, building confidence, sustaining peak performance. Rachel, let me go here, okay? Obviously, you're talking about what, the higher you achieve, the more skills you have, and obviously you're going into different, whether you're, no matter what area you're in, whether it's sports, whether it's business, okay, whether you're a couple of working guys like Joe and I, okay, the pressure's a lot. In the current American culture and economy, the pressures on regular people, not just the high achievers and everything else, is tremendous. And especially, and then when you throw in we're Catholic, not exactly friendly environments out there, particularly in the sports area. Okay, what are some of the common struggles that people have? I know this. I'll give you an example. Okay, just from the regular guy point of view, that's what Joe and I are. All right, when you got to put food on the table. When you got a wife, when you got a son, I have a son, Joe's got 5 kids under 10, okay? And you got to go in and I'm just a manager in a restaurant, all right? But much is expected of me in that, and at that level. And I can only imagine what it's like when you're trying to win a Super Bowl or you're trying to, win medals or you're trying to win a playoff game, not that the Yankees ever, will this year. But what are some of the common struggles that you hear about? Because obviously with high achievers and people like that, their struggles translate to us too, because we're all going through it. So what are some of the things that you've experienced or have seen?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you made that connection because it's so true. And I talk to people in all walks of life, on that exact thing. Because the way that I really kind of view it is that, we're all performing in some area of our life, right? Whether it's in our work or it's, I have a job interview that I have to do, or I have a presentation at work, or, I have to manage all of the schedules and expectations for my kids, or, whatever it is, there are absolutely those pressures. And then, like you said, yeah, when you're doing that kind of in a very high pressure environment or have those expectations of everyone on TV watching you, or in the stands watching you, it definitely builds up. But, I think two of the big things that we all kind of deal with are stress and anxiety and confidence, and being able to, when we can kind of manage and build the skills that we need for both of those things, we can be so much more effective, so much more empowered, so much more peaceful. Because with the stress management and the anxiety management, I think that's a little bit more self-explanatory, right? But with the confidence side of things, it's, confidence isn't this idea of boastfulness. It's not this idea of feeling like, I have to have it together all the time. It's really this idea of being able to trust myself. being able to trust the skills and abilities that God's given me and the way that he can work through me when I use those to be effective. I don't have to have it all together all the time, but I can figure it out. I don't have to wait to start this thing until I have it all figured out, because I can figure it out as I go, because I trust myself to use those strengths and skills. So that's where I think the confidence side of things come in, when we can kind of manage our stress and anxiety, and when we can know truly, our self-worth and our self-confidence and who God created us to be, and we can recognize how effective we can be when we, act in that. I think everything just becomes so much easier and more peaceful because we are empowered in that.
Rachel, Joe, if you don't mind, let me stay there for a second, okay? Rachel, let me go here with you. Because you mentioned something that gave me a thought. Not waiting for everything to be perfect. The way I like to put it is, the lights aren't always going to be green all the way down the road when you get in the car, but you got to get in the car. You got to start driving.
Yes.
So where am I going with that? Let's talk about confidence, okay? You're going to get lumped up. No matter how prepared you are, no matter how confident, you got to have, or put it like this, you have to have the confidence to know, I'm going to get in that car, I'm going to start driving. I'm not going to worry about when the lights are red or green. I know I'm going to get lumped up. But how important is it to keep in mind, I could deal with that. I know what's coming down the road. I know there's going to be bumps and bruises and all that, but I got to get in the car and drive. And I say this from personal experience, and I've had to overcome a lot along the lines of what you're talking about, anxiety, depression, things like that, right? And it's important to remember, particularly as Catholics, because we have Christ on our side, but just even on a human level, to say, I got to get in the car and drive. I'm going to get beat up, but I got to have that confidence to know I'm prepared for all that and keep it moving. What do you, I mean, I know that was a bit of a rant, but I think you know where I'm going.
Completely. And you're 100% right, because one of my favorite sort of mottos for myself is, I'll figure it out, because it is that level of, no, I don't have it all figured out all the time, and I don't know what I'm doing necessarily or what's next, but I've done that work to be able to trust myself that I'll figure it out. And yes, we have to keep going. And I love a good driving a car analogy. I use them all the time with my clients because, and I used a similar one a couple of days ago of, we are going to drive down the road, and we're going to hit construction zones. We're going to hit potholes. We're going to, like you said, we're going to hit a red light. We're going to hit those bumps in the road, but we recognize that that's normal and that's okay. And that's part of getting to my destination. And I'm not going to let that stop me from getting to my destination. But we don't take that same approach with ourselves at all. We often think, oh, well, I have to have it all figured out before I start. And then that's like not getting in the car at all, because I can't already get to my destination the second I sit down. And so, it's that ability to recognize I'm going to figure it out. God's with me. God's in that seat next to me, driving down the road. And we're going to be able to figure it out together. And he's already equipped me with the strengths and skills that I need. I think about our skills, our strengths and skills as sort of our inherent resources. And so what I mean by those is like, I'm a passionate person. I'm an organized person. I'm a good listener. I'm caring, whatever it is, you name it, right? Those strengths and virtues, that's who we are. That's who God created us to be. And when we use those inherent resources, that's when we can be effective. And when we can become aware of those things, when we hit those challenges, we can take that step back and say, okay, you know what? I am a good listener. I am patient. I am, a good problem solver. I'm, whatever. Which of these strengths can help me solve this problem right now? And then, Lord, help me live this strength out so that I can navigate this problem effectively and respond in the way that you want me to, right? Because that's part of where we can grow too. And so not letting the fact that I don't have it all together all the time stop me, because that also stops me from that growth and that abundance that God's calling me to.
No, Rachel, listen, I hear you loud, and I'm going to throw it over to Joe, but I will tell you this. One thing I know, going back to the car analogy, if I don't get to the final destination and I get halfway there, all right, I'm still better off than where I was when I got in the car.
Amen to that.
You know what I'm saying? Rachel Popcak Isaac is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. CatholicCounselors.com. I'm going to post a link in the description. Go find out what Rachel's doing, because we all need this kind of help. Primarily, Rachel's here because she's Catholic, we're Catholic, and this is what we're talking about. You have to have Christ in the center, but you got to do something. You got to pick yourself up and you have to overcome. Joe Resinello, where do you want to go?
I want to focus in on what you said, that Christ is in the seat next to you. That is huge. I don't know how people who don't have faith, and I work in a very secular environment. I work in banking. I mean, it's not exactly, they're not daily communicants. Let's put it that way. Not, I'm not saying it's like horrible, but it's definitely not, we're not singing Kumbaya at work. There's no question about that. Why I bring that up is you're at such a disadvantage when you don't have God, because I just trust God. Like, I got married I got married late, got married at 43. I have 5 kids, 10 years, 5 kids. Boom. We lost 3 kids. And people are like, you're crazy. Like, you're having a kid at 50. Like, you're crazy. And it's like, no, because God gave me the kid and it's going to be okay because I just trust God. Like, you talked about something, you said you trust yourself, and I trust myself. I'd be lying. I've been given some gifts and I use them. I do my best, but I trust God more.
Right.
Like really, I just trust him. And I'm learning, even when things don't go my way, I'm just like, well, all right, that's just part of the deal. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt or it's not a setback. I don't know how anyone lives their life outside of that. Because again, I mean, I got 5 kids. I got a house. I got a wife. My kids are young. I'm getting old. I mean, like, all the stuff, there's a
You
lot
ain't that old.
going.
You ain't
No,
that
I'm
old.
just saying, like on paper, it doesn't make sense. But it does make sense because God's in control and I'm not. And I trust him. Talk about that, because honestly, that is the missing link. I saw that. I mean, I worked through COVID in Manhattan. People who didn't have faith, they were crumbling. And just a quick story. I know I'm ranting. My wife always laughs at this, but you might get a kick out of it too. 9/11 happens. I was on the 32nd floor, 6 blocks away from the Trade Center falling. I'm aging myself now, but I'm just telling you, I was right there and I'm watching this whole thing go down. Second plane hits, my building shakes. I know it's not a mistake. Flames are coming out of the building. It was nuts. So I immediately go to the elevator to go down. So in the elevator is my boss. He's a lawyer from Northwestern. Rich guy, little older than me, and he's in the elevator with me. And he's crying. And I just look at him. I'm like, Norm, relax. And my wife laughs. Like, she's just like, you're telling this guy to relax. There's planes. Like, I'm just like, I wasn't like freaking out. I was just like, Norm, relax. We just go to the basement. We get out of the building, walk up the street. Obviously, it was insane, but I wasn't freaking out. He was, though. He was losing his mind. And this is the whole thing. Like, when you have God, like, you just trust him. You just trust him. And not for nothing, if I die, I trust God too. Like I trust him. He's going to take care of me. I take care of him. I do my best. Talk about that, because I think that's the missing thing. This whole world, they just don't get it and they don't want to.
No, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think one thing that I would highlight in that, though, is that you have a really
That
beautiful
I'm crazy? Yes, I am.
relationship with God. And, like, you have a really healthy relationship with God that says he is on my side. He does desire good for me. He is working for my good. Like, he is good, right? I honestly, I talk to a lot of people who they have that relationship with God, but there is that more unhealthy sense of, oh, well, he's doing this to punish me, or he's doing, he's right. Like, he's this kind of entity that I have to jump through X, Y, and Z hoops to make happy with me in order for me to be able to be in relationship with him, but that's not who God is, right? That's not, God is who you're talking about, right? Where he is working for our good. He's there with us no matter what we're doing, he's there with us and loves us and is working for our good. And I think that piece is a piece that a lot of people have a really hard time with, because not everybody, I think a lot of people have a really beautiful relationship with God, but it's that relationship aspect, right? Of God is in relationship with me no matter what. And yeah, I can do those things just with any relationship, right? Like I still have to do things to be in so think about, a best friend, right? That best friend is constantly showing up for me and constantly there for me and constantly checking in on me. And I still have to do things to be their friend. Right. So yeah, that's where our role comes in of we have to do those certain things to be in relationship with God, but God's always going to be there to be receptive of that, and say, yes, my arms are open to you. That's something that I think a lot of people have a hard time with, whether, I think we work with a lot of people who struggle with scrupulosity. And so that's where that kind of often comes in of, I have to do X, Y, and Z things right in order for God to be happy with me and for me to be in his good graces. And it's like, no, like we don't have to do anything to earn that relationship with God. He's already there, right? And he already is in that seat right next to us and in front of us and behind us and all of those different things. So I think what you're talking about is you're absolutely right, but that's that really beautiful and healthy relationship with God that says, he's good. He wants my good. He's here with me no matter what. And I'm here with him and we're doing this together. Right. So like you said, yeah, I mentioned trusting myself and yes, trusting God. Right. But it's that idea of like, I can trust God to be with me, to work through me, to help me figure this out, to help me learn and grow from this situation. So I definitely agree with you, but that's just one kind of distinction that I want to make because, we often do have to do that work with our relationship with God too, because the world, people, family members, whatever, have maybe given us kind of that more negative or kind of hurtful relationship with God, or maybe not a relationship at all. And we do really have to do that work to create a healthy relationship with God and really understand who he truly is and what he actually desires for us.
Rachel Popcak Isaac's joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Click the link in the description. Go to CatholicCounselors.com and go see what she has going on and learn a lot, just like Joe and I are doing right now. Rachel, let me go in this direction, if you don't mind, before the break. We have a few minutes. Now, the opposite of what we're just talking about, all right, is secular counseling, popular psychology, okay? Now, I'm saying this anecdotally, all right, but I've known people who they don't want to go to a psychologist. They don't want for therapy because the first thing that happens is someone wants to put them on a drug of some kind that they don't maybe even believe that they need. Okay. Now, I'm not saying there's people out there that don't need some medication, but I'm just talking about in general. My experience has been through talking to others who are suffering from certain, mental illnesses, mild, sometimes not so mild. And I'm an open book, and myself. Okay. I was taking a drug for because I suffer from moderate bipolar disorder. Okay, so my moods can swing. All right, but what I found, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is, I was on a drug, and after a while, I was like, I don't think I need this. I really don't, and I'm not God's strongest person. Trust me on that. Okay, but I was like, I don't think I need this. And where I'm going in this is, I think when you hear counseling, therapy, anything like that, people automatically think that someone's going to recommend a drug to them, and they're not perhaps willing to do that. And I kind of don't blame them, if you know what I mean. I think everything we're talking about on the one side, we're trusting in God and really trying to overcome in prayer and the graces of the sacraments. You might not need the drug, and I think that's one of the problems. Tell me if you agree. If you don't agree, please let me know. But that's one of the problems I see is the immediate reaction of, all right, here, I'm going to write your prescription. Okay, but I'm not here for that. I need some other help. Talk about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you that there's a time and a place for it, for sure. In certain situations, absolutely, it's helpful. I think kind of having that be the go-to is not, necessarily helpful. And the way that I kind of always like to think about medication, and let's frame it in terms of specifically like anxiety or depression medication and things like that. I think I always think about it as kind of a support tool, right? So I often kind of liken counseling, coaching to physical therapy, right? We don't go to physical therapy the first day and say, okay, they gave me these tools or exercises, I'm great now, right? So say you broke your leg and you have to go to physical therapy. You're not expecting to go in once or twice and then be able to go run a marathon, right? But that is what we expect of ourselves mentally and emotionally, and so I hear it a lot of like, oh, well, I've been doing counseling for, 6 weeks now, and I'm not, all of my problems aren't solved. And it's like, well, because we have to, do the work, right? We have to keep building those muscles, literally. And so I think about medication as kind of that support tool in a lot of situations, where some situations we don't need that and some situations we do. And so, I think about it as like, if I was going to physical therapy because I broke my leg and I'm trying to build the muscles back up and heal things, and sometimes I can do that without needing to take, Advil and something first, right? Other times the pain's so bad that I can't do that work because it's inhibiting me from being able to do the work. And so, yeah, sometimes I need to take the Advil to be able to go in and do the physical therapy, right? So I think about it that way. If I'm able to do the work and build the skills and put these things into practice, I'm not saying like, it's easy all the time, right? But if I'm still able to kind of show up and do that work even when it's hard, and then no, I probably don't need medication. But if I'm kind of saying, hey, I have all these tools, but I can't even figure out how to pick them up. I can't figure out how to implement them, or I can't stick with any of this. And, yeah, then maybe sometimes that medication is a helpful support tool to then still be able to do the work. I don't think it supplements it, of like, okay, it took away my symptoms and I'm great now. It's like, well, there's still that, underlying either hurt or mindset, or, the ways that we were taught to think through things, or, whatever, that's still there that we need to then work through. But I think about it as kind of that support tool that, no, not everybody needs, but sometimes we do need, and that's okay too.
What I usually, we're going to take a quick break here at the front line with Joe and Joe. What I usually think, Rachel, is that if in fact, like you said, you need that support tool, and it comes in the form of a prescription medication, all right, but that's not the end.
Right.
The medication is not the end in and of itself.
Exactly.
That's one of the reasons why I stopped taking the medication I was on, because it's like the doctor told me, well, you're going to have to take it for the rest of your life. And I'm like, honestly, I said to myself, and I prayed on it, prayed the rosary. I was like, I don't want to take this for the rest of my life. I don't. It was helpful for the short time, but then I don't want to take it. And I think sometimes people see the drug as an end in and of itself, whereas I'm happy the way, or I'm glad the way you said it, is no, that's just a helpful tool to help you start to overcome these things and eventually, hopefully wean off that. And again, I'm not diminishing some of the suffering that people go through out there where they need some additional assistance. Rachel, are you on social media?
I am, yeah. So we are on Catholic Counselors on Instagram, and then also I have hityourmark.life on Instagram, Facebook and as well. But Facebook and Instagram are kind of our primary ones. So you can find us both at Catholic Counselors, and then also me specifically at hityourmark.life.
All right, and I'll make sure that, as particularly on Facebook, we're not on Instagram, but on Facebook, I'll make sure that anybody watching this, you can just click that link also and see Rachel's Facebook page, and also CatholicCounselors.com, which I will put in the description. Click that, and you'll get all the information you need. Overcoming anxiety, building authentic confidence, and sustaining peak performance. That's what Rachel is doing at CatholicCounselors.com. We're going to have another great segment with her at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. We are way in the breach with Rachel Popcak Isaac, and we are discussing CatholicCounselors.com. That's Rachel's organization. I'll post a link in the description. You could also find her on Facebook at CatholicCounselors.com. And is it Hit the Mark on Facebook?
Hityourmark.life, or Rachel Isaac LCSW is the other way you can find me.
Right, and also on Instagram if you are on Instagram. So make sure you check all of that out. Joe Resinello, where do you want to start?
Let's start with Rachel, managing stress practically. I mean, I could just speak for me. I mean, I definitely have stress in my life. One thing I do is I go to confession. Confession is huge. You know, your bags are packed. How much stress do people have in this world because they're not right with God? I mean, I'm not right, period, Rachel, as you probably could tell. But at the same time, like, I go to confession twice a month and I feel good. You know, like my bags are packed. Like I'm ready. You know, if God calls me, you know, I'll probably do some time in purgatory. But at the end of the day, you know, hopefully I don't spend too much time there and I move on. Secondly, adoration. My wife and I, we go to adoration on the weekends before the kids get up. I get up early. I go, then she goes. A lot of peace found there. A lot of peace. I always tell people this, even people who don't believe in God. I'm like, go stand, sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament. You'll find peace. Like, you don't have to be a practicing Catholic to go to adoration. Just sit there. Those are my things, but you're the professional. You tell me, what do you do?
Yeah, no, I mean, those are beautiful things. And I think, obviously the relationship with God aspect is huge, but then also one of the, just kind of from the mental side of things, some of the reasons why those things are helpful is because we're slowing down. We're taking that pause. It's so easy for us to get caught up in just the rush of life all the time. And then we can really think about stress and anxiety, or really any feeling that we have, as more so emotional regulation or dysregulation. So when I'm emotionally regulated, my muscles are more relaxed. My thinking brain is online, so I'm able to problem solve more effectively. I have that ability to trust myself and trust God. And, I can process all of that and make decisions, and it's just, I feel better when I'm emotionally regulated. When I'm emotionally dysregulated, what that looks like is my brain is flooded with all of these stress chemicals. That thinking brain, which is our cortex, literally goes offline. And then we're just functioning from our limbic system, which is the emotional reactions part of our brain. And so that emotional reactions part of our brain basically determines everything as a threat, and is just saying, here's a threat, get away from the threat. And it's going to try to do that as fast as possible, which is why we end up dealing with so much stress or anxiety or reactive decisions or whatever it is. And so I think that regulating, right, we were talking about adoration, or being able to kind of slow down in that moment. I think just being aware, even physically, of how that dysregulation is manifesting in our body. So again, maybe my muscles are tensed, or my heart rate is speeding up, or my respiratory rate is speeding up, or my thoughts are racing. Just being able to kind of intentionally slow down, whether that's taking some deep breaths, that's taking a pause, saying a prayer, going to adoration. One of a kind of fun one is starting to just try to use your non-dominant hand for daily tasks, like opening a door or like brushing your teeth, because it makes your thinking brain kick into gear, because you're not on autopilot brushing your teeth or opening a door and just not even thinking about it. Suddenly you have to like create that brain body connection and slow yourself down to actually be able to process things and think about what you're doing. And that brain body connection helps us regulate ourselves. So anything that's, a grounding technique, or, that's why breathing exercises are helpful, because again, it creates that emotional regulation where it helps us drain out some of those stress chemicals and create that brain body connection where our thinking brain is actually coming back online. So that's why, along with, of course, the graces that come with it, things like prayer, adoration, confession, all of that are so helpful on so many levels. But it's not just the spiritual level, it is the mental and physical level as well, because we are slowing down, we are reflecting, we are processing, and that's all going to help us manage our stress and anxiety so much more.
Absolutely, Rachel. Let me ask you this, okay? A lot of high performance, high pressure Catholics out there in business world, the sports world, okay? And some people look at them like they have Teflon, like everything bounces off. And I'm sure, and this is where I'm going with this, and I'm sure they don't have Teflon skin, okay? And a lot of things don't bounce off. In your experience, what are some of the things that some of these people go through? Like I'll give you an example. Somebody who I respect tremendously, Caitlin Clark, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, she's getting put through the ringer because of a lot of woke nonsense and everything else that's out there. We won't get you in trouble, Rachel. We promise we won't get into that today. But that woman, I'm using her as an example. She's got a ton of pressure on her. She achieves at a high level. She's a great athlete, all right? She's revitalized the WNBA, and yet in the sports media, she's hated. I can't even imagine what that woman goes through, okay? So I'm using her as an example. How do you approach whether it's a business person, an athlete, somebody who's achieving at that high a level, and yet is suffering from a lot of the things that we all suffer from.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a couple of things, but some of the big things that kind of stand out to me are certainly what we were talking about before about kind of knowing our why or knowing who we are, right? Knowing who, God created us to be, knowing, that we can trust him and trust ourselves and, with him to figure it out. But I think the other thing is, knowing our why. And what I mean by that is like knowing what my purpose is, knowing why I started in the first place and why it matters to me, and being able to tie that in even with, again, who God created me to be and, what he's calling me to, right? And so, yes, she gets a lot of hate or negative comments, but like you said, she's done so much. And she's able to focus on who she is, the strengths that she brings to the table, and also her why she started, why she's passionate about this, why it matters to her. And when we can remember that, we can keep going. We don't deal with burnout in the same way, because I think burnout really happens when we are going through the motions and doing all the things and dealing with the pressure, but we've completely lost sight of our why, of our purpose, of why it matters to us, of why we started in the first place. And so when we can connect that and recognize what our mission and purpose and, vocation is in that, suddenly there's a reason for it. So everything becomes more meaningful. Not to go off on a tangent, but one of the things that I think is really important in this is St. Ignatius talked about the concepts of consolations versus desolations. And just breaking it down, really as quickly as possible, consolations are...
Take your time, please. This is great, but please.
So consolations are, those movements of the Holy Spirit, right? That God calls us to, and consolations are always going to be characterized by a sense of an increased meaningfulness, intimacy, and virtue in our life and our relationships. So that meaningfulness, like I was talking about, there's meaning there, there's that why, there's that vocation and purpose, intimacy, drawing me into that deeper, more meaningful relationship with God, with myself, with another person, whatever the situation is. And then that virtue is being able to both use and grow in those strengths and virtues that help me be effective. Desolations, however, are those things that Satan really likes to use to distract us, right? And those desolations are going to be characterized by a sense of powerlessness, a sense of isolation. So maybe I'm feeling separated from other people, or even stuck in a situation, stuck in an unhealthy situation and isolated there. And then also a sense of of self-pity or self-indulgence, and so when we can kind of take that step back, and when we're doing our work or we're making a decision or, whatever it is, when we can kind of take that step back and say, okay, how can I approach this in a way that's going to lead me towards that meaningfulness and intimacy and virtue, rather than in a way that's going to get me stuck in that powerlessness or isolation or self-pity or self-indulgence. That's where we can find that freedom and that empowerment and that peace and that, and again, that abundance that God calls us to, because now we're working towards that good, and we're not getting stuck in, again, that powerlessness or isolation or self-pity or self-indulgence. So I just think that kind of ties in, because when people are saying negative things to us, when we're dealing with a lot of pressures, it's certainly really easy to fall into that powerlessness or isolation or self-pity or self-indulgence, right? Because why are they against me? Why do they hate me? Why are they, whatever. But if I can say, no, like, okay, how can I approach this in a way that's still going to lead me towards that meaningfulness and intimacy and virtue? I can recognize the impact that I'm still able to have. I can recognize the people who support me. I can recognize the action steps I can still take. I can say, Lord, how do you want me to respond to this? And then take action from that. And that helps me navigate. It doesn't mean everything's like super easy and perfect all the time, but it means that I can move through it and I can navigate it and I can find hope in it as well.
Rachel Popcak Isaac is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Rachel, I'm going to throw it over to Joe, but I got one quick comment, because I really am. Okay, I'm moved by what you said, because I didn't know that about St. Ignatius. See, this is why Joe and I say on the show all the time, we learn as much as our audience. You just described Joe and Joe. You just said, because we started this 5 years ago or so, right? And sometimes it's a struggle. Sometimes it's, what, and I didn't never thought of it in terms of what is my why. I mean, somewhere in there, we both think of it as like, well, we said we're going to do this because we want to try to evangelize the nation, the country, the culture. We want to try to strengthen Catholic men, but never really explicitly thought of it. Oh, that's my why. It's just, but we kind of knew it in our soul. That's why we get up every day before we go to work, okay, in our normal jobs, and do this, because professionally speaking, we're not where we would want to be with the front line with Joe and Joe, but we know our why. We know why. That before Joe does his banking and I go to the restaurant, okay, I know why we're doing this. And I'm so happy you said that, because I never thought of it in terms of consolation or desolation, yet I go through both of those.
Yes.
I find consolation in what we do along the lines of you. And then sometimes I have those moments where the evil one's trying to get in my head and tries to, you're never going to make it, or you're not doing any good, or, all that kind of stuff. So you just so specifically describe Joe and Joe. If you have a comment on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that was helpful to you, and that you see kind of yourself in that, because it is that idea of like, I think it's easy to separate ourselves out of, I'm not that Super Bowl athlete, like you said before, right? But, this stuff still applies to all of us. It matters no matter what role we're in life, whether we have a job or we don't, or, like, whatever it is that we're doing, it still applies and it still matters, and you have a role to play, and God has a plan for you, and you have strengths and skills and things to offer, and you're here for a reason. And so, yeah, being able to remember that and apply that and be able to move towards that meaningfulness and intimacy and virtue, so that we can navigate those really hard moments. Again, not to say that those really hard moments aren't going to happen, but now we know how to respond to them, and move through them, and not get completely trapped or derailed by them, or give up something that's really good. Like you're saying, even just with this show, like being able to say, no, this does make a difference and it does matter. And so even on those hard days when those desolations kick in, I'm still going to show up. And that's what helps you achieve that next goal and that next goal, because now you're working with God to bring that good into the world.
Absolutely. Rachel Popcak Isaac is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. CatholicCounselors.com. Overcoming anxiety, build authentic confidence, and sustaining peak performance. I'm going to put a link in the description. Go to CatholicCounselors.com. Go see everything Rachel's got going on. Follow her on Instagram. Joe Resinello.
Rachel, in doing research for the interview, I came across that you integrate theology of the body. For those who don't know, that comes from John Paul II. I mean, it was really a revolutionary idea that really impacted the world. I mean, it impacts all Catholic marriages. But I'm interested how it impacts what you do. It jumped out at me immediately, and I'm going to give you the floor. Please tell us.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's just, it encompasses everything that we've been talking about, right? Because it's that idea that, we're not just a brain trying to push harder, we're a body trying to work harder. It's, we are mind, body, soul, we're whole persons. And we are all unique and unrepeatable people that God created us to be. And so what we were just talking about, we all have that mission and that purpose, and we all have that vocation and those strengths, and, it's on purpose. And so in my work, I integrated a lot in terms of what I was even talking about before, in terms of the brain body connection. I've heard from and, talked with, and, a lot of people who either are, mental performance specialists in the secular world, or have worked with, secular mental performance coaches. And I mean, nothing against any of them at all, but I've heard a lot of, it's just the mindset stuff, right? And I don't think that it can be effective if it just stops there, right? Because we are those whole persons, mind, body, and soul. And we have to integrate all of them to be able to be effective and to be able to reach that potential and be who God created us to be. And so that's where the theology of the body comes in, is remembering that we're those whole persons, and remembering that God created each of us uniquely, and being able to build the skills and the tools that we need to be able to know that and to own that and to live that out. So it's a little bit of a nutshell of how I implement that, but it's a huge part of what I do.
Rachel, let me ask you this. I mean, we've all heard and perhaps even gone to, self-help counselors, people like that. My experience, again, it's only anecdotal. I don't have stats to prove it. I know this, everything we're talking about, and obviously having Christ at the center, is that what happens is, as you know, the saying goes, it's foundational. Christ is he's your rock. That's not just some nice saying. Okay. The foundation means you could build the house on that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have the solid foundation, I'm of the opinion, I mean, I used to be a stockbroker in another life, okay? I can't tell you how many self-help people they bring in to try to do the mindset thing when you
Yeah.
got to get on the phone and sell stocks to guys on the telephone.
Yes.
So I'm pretty experienced with that. I just don't find that it lasts.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, you know, you could tell me or correct me if I'm wrong. I've always seen with my eyes that it doesn't, and experience myself, that stuff doesn't last. The only thing that's been lasting in my life are the things I've been doing since I got back to practicing the faith and put Christ in the center, because it seems to me that, okay, I could change my mindset. But then what happens when the challenges come up? Boom, I'm right back in the same boat because I'm lacking, I might be lacking that foundation that we know is Christ. Am I off in that? What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. And I think, again, that's where kind of that mind, body, soul thing, comes in. And that's why it matters so much, because I think a lot of times we even boil down just the mindset, kind of stuff just thinking positively. And honestly, I kind of hate the terms, positively or negatively, because it's just when we think positively, it's just so easy for that negative mindset to come in and say, that's not true. You're just telling yourself that. It doesn't actually matter. That's not who you are, right? And then it just feels like we're fighting with ourselves. And that's why I think, what you're talking about kind of the mindset stuff, it doesn't really last. But I think when we can I prefer the terms helpful versus hurtful, because it ties in with everything we were talking about with, the consolations versus desolations that St. Ignatius shared is this thought that I'm having helping me? Is this action step that I'm taking helping me, or is it hurting me? And again, that can mean, is this moving me towards that meaningfulness and intimacy and virtue, or is it leading me towards that powerlessness or isolation or self-pity or self-indulgence, but just being able to summarize that and say, is this helping me or hurting me? And that comes to the boundaries that we set in our life and in our relationships, to the people that we spend our time with, to the work that we do, the thoughts that we have, or not so much even the thoughts that we have, but I guess the thoughts that we commit to, because we all have automatic thoughts that just kind of pop into our head that didn't have any consciousness behind them, right? But those thoughts that we commit to, am I going to listen to that? Or am I going to decide to focus on something that is more helpful to me? Or, I'm feeling completely exhausted and drained and burnt out, and I could just, give into that feeling, or I could take these helpful action steps that help me move towards the feeling that I want to have, which is maybe fueled, more fueled, more energized, more connected to the other people in my life, to, whatever. And so being able to kind of take those action steps, that's where, I think all of it comes together, right? Is having that ability to have that foundation and that healthy relationship with God, and then be able to take those, use that information to direct my action steps, which is then going to help my mindset, and they just become these buckets that pour into each other rather than these isolated things that kind of are fragmented pieces of myself.
Absolutely. Rachel Popcak Isaac joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. CatholicCounselors.com. Hit the link in the description. Joe Rossinello.
I'm going to talk about the stress that our society puts on young people, particularly high school through young adults. Obviously, there's always been high achievers. I mean, I knew high achievers, when I was in high school many moons ago. But I think it's even crazier now. And I think it stems from, we live in a post-Christian society, and I want to expand on that, and then I'm interested in your thoughts. We don't know who we are. You talked about connecting with your why. I related to, we just don't know who we are anymore. So we basically put that on our kids. You have to do this. You have to do this. I mean, we're like training Marines, and they're 9. You know what I'm saying? It's a kid. The kid that, they don't have to speak Korean when they're 11. It's okay. You know what I'm saying? Do your best. I just want you to do your best. But why do we do that? Under it, we don't know who we are anymore. We're trying to be something we're not. I didn't get the SATs to go to Yale. Joe's brother went to Yale. I didn't go to Yale, but that's okay. You know what I'm saying? Be you.
Yeah.
Talk about that, because under all of this, first talk about the stress the kids are on, because they're under an immense amount of stress. But under it, the parents don't know who they are.
Mhm.
Like you're a child of God. You're destined to go to heaven. I want you to become a saint. Maybe not a capital S saint, a lowercase s
Yeah.
saint. But that's okay. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Whatever you do, I love you. Talk
Yes.
about that. I don't think it's there, that idea, and people are crazy because of it.
No, I agree with you on that because you're absolutely right that, we've really developed this idea that we have to meet these unrealistic expectations all the time. Whether it's, and I mean, I don't know that we can 100%, say it's social media's fault, but social media is not helping, right? In terms of, your house has to be perfect all the time. You have to be posting, the next success or achievement that you had in your career. You have to have the most creative craft for your kid. You have to, whatever it is, your kid has to be excelling, in their class and in their sports and all of the things, right? It's just these unrealistic expectations that we all feel like we constantly have to prove our worth, or that our kids have to prove their worth, and somehow our kids proving their worth then proves mine, right, as a parent. And so it does become really unhealthy levels of pressure because, yeah, we forget, no, we already have that worth. We don't have to own that. We don't have to earn that. We can just own that. And that really translates into the expectations that we have for ourselves, the expectations that we put on our kids. I saw this, I don't know if it was a social media post, I think, but it was kind of this quote basically saying that, we expect more from our kids than we do from other adults. We expect our kids to never have an attitude, never be in a bad mood, to always be able to, show up and get the best grades, to keeping these insane schedules when it comes to school and extracurricular activities and sports and, and being the best at all of it. And again, never being in a bad mood the whole time, and never complaining about anything, never having a hard time with anything, being able to maintain friendships. We expect more from our kids than we do from other adults. But that's not to say we don't have those same high expectations for ourselves. I just think a lot of times we've kind of given up on ourselves, and then we project that onto our kid even more because, well, I want you to achieve what I didn't. And it becomes really unhealthy because then we're forgetting who we are, who God created us to be, the life that we still have ahead of us, and then also who our kid is and their innate worth just in who they are.
Rachel, let me ask you a question. I'm sorry to cut you off. Stay there
Yep.
1 second. I'm so happy you mentioned that. All right. I'll be very brief, and I really want your comment because we got about 3 minutes left. I do that. And I remind myself, don't do that. Because I just turned 58, and I have a laundry list of mistakes, all right, that I've made in my life that make me on one level unhappy. But then I have remembered to myself, but wait a minute, if God allows it, I got a lot of time left, and I could do a lot of things. How important is it for parents not to fall into that trap? Because remember, I have a 16-year-old son, okay? He's looking at me to see if I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to do. Not putting everything on him. He needs to see me achieving. He needs to see me waking up. Needs to see me getting lumped up. All right? Because if I'm sitting there and I just don't want to get out of bed and it's Saturday morning, it's like, that's my weekend. I'm just going to pour Johnny Walker Black and stay in bed and go play. Not exactly going to inspire greatness in my son. Important in the comment I'd like you to, or what I would like you to comment on is the importance of, no, you as parents, we all do it, no matter how hard it is. We have to show our kids that even though we're older and maybe made mistakes and everything else, we're still moving forward too.
Mm-hmm.
We're bringing you along for the ride, but we're still moving forward too.
Yeah.
You get where I'm going with that?
Completely. And honestly, there's so much in that. But I guess just to address it as briefly as I can, I think, yes, 100% we have to remember. But at the same time, like you're saying, those mistakes that you made, right? That's not something to ignore. It's something you learned from. It's something that, again, we assume that we have to have it all figured out all the time. But no, you can use that to go to your son and say, hey, I went through this. This is what I learned from it. This is how I responded to it. And this is what I'm still learning and how I'm still responding to it and how I'm still, it's, we have to take that responsibility and accountability too, because otherwise we just lecture our kid, go do this. You need to do this. You should do this. And then our kids see you're telling me to do all this, but you're not living any of that out yourself. And that's crazy, right? Like, and then yes, we still have life ahead of us to grow, to do great things, to learn, to live out that vocation, and that doesn't mean that we always have to be reinventing ourselves or going back to school or starting a new business, but you can. I talk to people all the time, talk to people in like their 60s, 70s who are starting new things because they're passionate about it. And why not? You still have life ahead of you. And so live it. You're being called to do something, go do it. So yes, 100%. We have to live that out. And remember, we all still have life ahead of us and we're all in this together. We're all learning together. So stop lecturing and start relating and living.
Rachel, you're so right. Just very quickly, my wife and I, our sons he was our foster son. He got placed with us when he was 12. So he's 16 now. Earlier this year, he became our legal son.
That's
and
amazing.
you know who I learned that from? I learned that from him.
Yep.
I learned it from him. See, I didn't have the privilege of having him from the time he was born and raising him up the whole time. It's only been a 4-year for whatever it's been experience, but I learned it from him. But Papa, what are you doing? He said to me one time, hit me like a ton of bricks right in my face, So, and I've strived now, and by the grace of God, been more successful in showing him, you know what, you're right. And yeah, it's right. Papa needs to, get up and do things a little bit better, if you will. Rachel, one more time, your social media, the website, anything you want to tell our audience in at the end here.
Yeah, you can find out more about all of our work as pastoral counselors and also my work as a faith-based success and performance coach at catholiccounselors.com. Then explore all of our tabs, but especially our services tab to learn more about both of those. And then we're on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us at Catholic Counselors, and then also my topics specifically at hityourmark.life or Rachel Isaac, LCSW.
Awesome. Rachel Popcak Isaac, it was such a pleasure talking to you. And we got to have you back soon, okay? This was a great conversation. We really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
It was great being with you guys. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you all out there for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Download the app, share it with your friends. You'll have access to all of our station's content. And if you like what Joe and I do, we post all of these interviews on social media, X, Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. And we also go live Thursday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern time, where we get in a whole lot of trouble. And if you like our content, help us get out to a wider audience. Hit a like, a subscribe, a share. Do all that fun stuff. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.